Díagweave Galera Accordia August Foil wrote, welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And, I hardly know how to actually introduce my next guest, but his story will probably blow you all away. Really, it's just an extraordinary story of courage and forgiveness uh, against the worst of horrors, and that's Azim Khamisa. Hello, Azim Khamisa.
Hi, Mary. How are you? Thank you for having me as your guest.
It's an absolute pleasure. You're there in California.
Yes, in the San Diego area where we enjoy, I think, better weather than you do in Ireland, but it's
Oh
beautiful over here.
God, you could be sure of it. It's better weather than here in Ireland. Azim, you were in Ireland. You were telling me in Dingle. You have
Yeah,
friends.
I've been to Ireland several times. I grew up in Kenya and then went to school in England and traveled extensively through Europe. And I think my first visit to Ireland probably was 30, 40 years ago. And
Wow.
since then, I have some friends. So I visited Dublin and the southwest part of Ireland, and
That's where I went.
lovely, lovely experience. I love the Irish people. They are very hospitable and friendly, and I still remember that first time I was in Dublin. I asked one of the hotel desk clerk that was working about a restaurant that I was recommended to go to, and she was leaving her shift, and she says, "Oh, I'll show you where it is." It was at least 10 blocks, and she walked me all the way. And I said, "Well, you're going this way anyway." She said, "No, no, no, no." I said, "My God, this would never happen in America."
No. Uh, Although
Yeah,
I found every time I was in America, I found American people very hospitable, but whether they would actually go 10 blocks, and it is an Irish thing.
yeah,
I've often, people asking directions in the car, I've often said to people, look, just sit in and I'll drive you there because it's
yeah,
easier than explaining
right.
how to actually, of course, then you find out you're practically in another county by the
Yeah,
time you actually get to where they want to go. But it just seems to be an Irish thing, Azim.
yeah,
But for the listeners, Azim, your story is extraordinary. Your son, Tariq, was 21 years of age, and it made headlines because the case was the first time that it happened in California, where a 14-year-old was charged with charged as an adult, um, and the the 14-year-old in question murdered your son Tariq, who was 21 at the time and a student. Could
he's
you tell
actually
us?
he was 20 actually, but
20,
close,
and
close, close to 21.
yeah, but
He
still only
died
20.
in, yeah, he died in January and 21st, at the end of January 1995. He would have turned 21 on the 6th of March, a couple of months later.
So he was still. It's still very raw, I'd imagine, for you. I'd say.
Yes, it's been 26 years, so you never ever get over losing a child. I'm sure most parents can relate to that. You learn to live with it, but it's not something that ever leaves your psyche. Your children are such an important part of you. And if I had been at the scene of the crime, I would have instinctively put my body between him and the bullet. But of
Of
course, I
course,
wasn't there. Yeah.
I I think it's a natural it's a natural emotion. But tell me, the night that you found out that Tony Hicks had actually murdered Tariq.
Yeah,
What?
I actually worked in the international financial services. So I traveled a lot, and I was actually returning from a trip a trip from Mexico City, and I got in late that night, Saturday. It was a Saturday evening, and some friends of mine picked me up at the airport. We had to go to a birthday party and brought me home. I had no clue that my son lay dead less than 10 miles away from where I live. The next morning, my maid came in and there was a note on my door from homicide saying, "This is Sergeant Lambert. We're trying to reach Tariq's family." So I very quickly called them. It was early Sunday morning. And she told me on the phone that Tariq had been shot and killed. And my knee jerk reaction was, it can't be. He was a good kid. He was a student at San Diego State University, an art student, great writer, great photographer,
Yeah.
blessed with a great sense of humor. His, his dream was someday to work for National Geographic. He loved travel. He loved cultures. Um, uh, I always said he was a joy to be around. Even in any serious moments, Tariq could always crack a joke or say something to lighten the atmosphere. Uh, his hero was Gandhi, a man of peace.
Yeah.
And I thought, this doesn't make sense that he would be killed. He worked as a pizza delivery man while going to school on Saturdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So I quickly hung up on him, thinking it was mistaken identity. Uh, I live in the San Diego area. We have a lot of South American uh, Latino people that have dark skin like I do and like my son did. So I thought, they must have made a mistake. So I very quickly hung up on homicide and called his home. He had recently moved into his home with his girlfriend, Jennifer. They actually got engaged a few weeks before he died and moved into the same apartment. Uh, you know, fully expecting him to pick up the phone. It was Sunday morning. Of course, he didn't. Jennifer did, and she couldn't say anything. She was sobbing, and I remember I was in the kitchen, and that's when it hit, and I lost strength in both of my legs as I collapsed to the floor, curled up in a ball, hit my head against the refrigerator. Uh, I don't have the words, Mary, to describe how excruciating, painful that experience was. Except I never, I don't ever have felt pain like that. It literally felt like a nuclear bomb had gone off in my heart.
I was struck by that comment that you made, and I just thought, I do understand the grief. I think it can only really happen to you once in your life. That it's like, no matter no matter how many very close people to you die, I think it can only happen to you once, where you feel that that nuclear bomb has just exploded in your chest.
Right. And,
Struck
you're
by that quote that you said, and it was reported that you said it was like a nuclear bomb had exploded in my chest. I thought
yeah.
that's so
Yeah, I
profound.
mean, you're blown into smithereens, and you can never find all the pieces that could never ever come back together. That life I knew had changed, and changed forever. And um, I practice as a Sufi Muslim. Sufis are the metaphysical arm of Islam. And I was in my early 40s when I lost my son, and I started to meditate in my early 20s. So I had a pretty strong spiritual foundation. I believe in God. And I remember that the pain was so excruciating that I actually left my body. And I have since read that when victims go through deep trauma, they often do that.
Yeah.
And I believe I went into the loving embrace of God. Don't remember how long I was gone for. Um, and it felt like a long time. And as I said, when the explosion subsided, God sent me back into my body with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun. Um, I didn't really understand the relevance of that comment, obviously, at that time. And I had to make some excruciating calls to his mother. She lived in Seattle, Washington. Hardest thing I've ever done. How do you tell a mother, she's never going to see her son again?
To tell her over the phone, which you had no alternative but to do
Yeah,
that. But you
and she had a very special relationship with Tariq, and I also have a very special relationship with my mom, although she passed in 2017. And the love between a mother and a child. And fortunately, she wasn't by herself. And when I let her know, I know she did the same thing. She let out this loud
wail.
scream as she dropped to the floor. Fortunately, she wasn't by herself. She was visiting her family, and I remember finishing a very broken conversation with one of her brothers. Then I had to call my daughter, my mom. I mean, it made some really excruciating calls.
Tariq was your only son.
He was my only son. I have a beautiful daughter who has given me 3 beautiful grandchildren. So I'm very blessed that he wasn't my only child. As the work that I've done in the aftermath of my son, I've met many parents that have lost an only child, which I think would have been a lot harder.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, I suppose in retrospect, Tariq is with you every moment of every day now because of the foundation that you've set up,
Yeah.
Tariq Khamisa Foundation, in his memory. But before we go on to that, the boy that actually killed your son, who killed Tariq, was 14 years of age, and he was charged. And shortly before, it's interesting that shortly before Tariq was killed, the law changed in California to say that anyone, a child or a 14-year-old, could be charged as an adult. And your son's case was the first to have it actually carried out in. And he was charged and found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. So he was charged as an adult. Tell me about how you found out that Tony had killed Tariq, and that Tony was only 14 and had been handed the gun by an 18-year-old, and it had been part of gang-related ritual, if you like.
Right. Well, apparently the visit from homicide, which happened soon after that phone call, told me that there were some eyewitnesses and that there was a youth gang involved with killing Tariq in an initiation ritual, and that they were following up and they had some leads. It didn't take them very long. Tariq was killed on a Saturday night, and by Wednesday, all 4 young people that were involved with Tariq's murder were reprimanded and brought into into the juvenile justice system. And the way it happened is that the girl, one of the girls that was part of the gang, um, it was not a very big gang. I think they had about 35 members. They organized themselves as the Black Mob, mostly all juveniles. And the girl who called for the pizza um, found out after Tariq was shot, and the four men ran back to the home where the gang used to meet on a regular basis, into a house that Tariq had been shot, killed. She actually ran out to see if she could save Tariq, but it's too late. Tariq was already dead. And then she called a nonprofit organization that I was on board of, that she knew who had done it. And the executive director of that particular nonprofit talked to her, convinced her to talk to the police, which she did. And then she had to be in the witness protection area. She had to change her name, move out of San Diego to Kansas City. And of course, all of the four young people, three of them were 14. The leader of the gang, as you mentioned, was 18. Were all arrested and by Wednesday. So it was all over the papers. And then, as you pointed out, they had changed the law on January 1st, 1995, where they reduced the age from 16 to 14, where a juvenile could be tried as an adult. And this was the first case. And the district attorney that had run on a platform of trying to reduce youth violence, as you know, it's a huge problem in America. So it took them 2 years to decide whether he should be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And by that time, I had started the foundation. I created in Tariq's name, reached out to his grandfather and guardian, and looking at, they were victims at both ends of the gun. I forgave him. He was 14, and I didn't think he was the enemy. I think sometimes in deep trauma, there's a spark of clarity, and that spark of clarity was the download I had, that there were victims at both ends of the gun. As I said, it didn't come from my intellect or my loving heart, rather a download from a higher power.
Do you think it was your spirituality, Azim? Do you think it was your spirituality that helped you to be able to channel that level of forgiveness for somebody who had actually taken the life of somebody so precious to you? I mean, okay, yes, he was 14, but some will argue, Tariq, if you'll excuse me for saying it, some will argue that, you know, when you go out and you're part of a gang and you take the gun in your hand and you shoot it, even at 14, certainly at 14, children know they have a sense of right and wrong. And certainly when you look at videos and you look at photographs of Ples, his grandfather, who seems an absolutely lovely man, and you know that he was brought up with a good man and in a good home, so he would have been taught and would have understood right from wrong. And when you make a decision like that, you know, I can understand people wanting a 14-year-old who shoots and kills another child, basically, or anyone, to be charged as an adult. Alternatively, I also see, from having done research on genocide and looking at child soldiers, and I can understand your side of it, where you see the victim on both sides of the gun, because, you know, but for the grace of God, or, you know, we're just one mistake away from making similar mistakes in our lives.
Right.
I just wonder how much of your level of forgiveness was searching for a way of coping yourself as well. You know, did it help you as much as it helped Tony to forgive Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back at what has manifested in the last 26 years of my life, for having made the choice of forgiveness, I can say unequivocally or without any hesitation or doubt that it was the right choice.
Yeah.
So I did not know then, uh, but somehow in my heart, I was able to have empathy and felt compassion for Tony, that I saw that he wasn't the enemy. What I'd learned about the plight of young people in America, so many of them fall through the crack, uh, partly because of peer pressure, societal issues, or they get radicalized, similar like you mentioned with, children soldiers, and they fall to the crack and then get involved with crime and gangs and drugs and alcohol and weapons. Although he did have a very good home with his grandfather, but his grandfather didn't get Tony till he was 8 years old. He was born to a 15-year-old. His father had no relationship with him. His favorite uncle was murdered in a gang-related event in South Central Los Angeles. He was an angry kid because he really wasn't very loved. And when his grandfather got him, probably the damage was already done.
Yeah.
So when you look at Tony's life history, Tariq was nobody to him. He's another pizza delivery man. And he was under orders from an 18-year-old to shoot and kill Tariq, who had shot a homeless person 6 weeks before this tragedy, just to show off to his homeboys that if they didn't obey him, he could do the same to them. So I'm sure Tony felt a lot of pressure. So I felt that, hanging him from the highest pole was not the solution. How would that improve society? It wouldn't bring Tariq back. That the real culprit wasn't Tony, but the societal peer pressure that forced many young men and women to
But
fall to the.
it wasn't straight away that you forgave Tony. It took 2 years, wasn't it? It took around 2 years for you to actually visit him in prison.
Actually, no, I visited him 5 years after the prison.
At what time? At what stage did you meet up with Ples you became almost like a brother to his grandfather?
Right. Well, we are brothers. We've been together. And pretty soon. I started the foundation 9 months after Tariq died. And then soon after I started the foundation, I asked the district attorney to introduce me to Ples. And I remember that meeting, and my attitude was, I'm not here screaming revenge or retribution. I'm not here in anger. I see we both lost a child, and I lost my son, and you lost your grandson, although he lived with his grandfather, calls him daddy, to the adult criminal justice system. I can't bring Tariq back, and there's nothing you can do to get Tony out of prison. And I started this foundation with a very lofty mission of stopping kids from killing kids. And the real reason I'm here is that I can't do this by myself. While I can't bring Tariq back and you can't get Tony out, the one thing you and I can do is to make sure other young people in our community don't end up dead like Tariq or end up in prison like Tony. That we can do. Will you help me? So he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And initially the foundation started with a mandate of breaking the cycle of youth violence. And we had three essential goals. First was to save lives of kids, because we lose so many on a daily basis. I still weep. I'm sure you remember Sandy Hook and Newtown Connect. 20 first graders, they were 6, 7 years old, were was, wiped out in automatic machine gun fire. They had a lot of living to do.
It happened in Scotland also, a load of children all killed
Yeah,
by one person in a school. Do you know, some years, it's insane. How much do you think, we don't allow guns in this country to, certainly not, I mean, that's not to say that people don't have guns in this country. Yes, they do. But I mean, you have to have a license in this country, and usually it's for hunting, which I'm opposed to because I'm anti-blood sport. But it's, you can't just rock up at a shop and buy a gun in this country, the same as you can in America. It seems to, from looking from the outside in, that it's just too easy for people, and young people to get their hands on guns, in America. I almost feel that if they completely banned guns in the States, then you have some hope of trying to beat the cycle of murder. Because once somebody fires a gun, that's it. There's no negotiations after that. You can talk to a child, when there isn't a gun in the equation, but when there's guns so easily accessible, you're beating your head off a stone wall. Because they it's like the child soldiers. What they get with the gangs is a sense of family, a sense of belonging, and the older members of the gang make them feel that they're part of, finally they belong, they're finally part of a group of like-minded people, and before they realize it, they're heavily involved in crime. And not everybody is as fortunate to meet an Azim Khamisa. And
yeah, no, absolutely. If I was running the country, I would do exactly what you said: ban all guns. We have more guns in America than people. Uh, for 320 million people, we have over 400 million guns. I don't own a gun, and as you pointed out, it's easy access. And while it will be difficult to ban guns in America because they're very much part of the American history, culture, much like Chevrolets and hamburgers, but I do think that we should absolutely outlaw what they call the midnight special. You can buy it in any inner city for $20 on the black market, and it doesn't have any safety mechanism, even for the shooter. Or, outlaw this automatic weapons that can shoot out, 100 bullets in a second. Why do we need that? We're not here on the front line of a war zone.
why
I
would
mean,
anyone
maybe you leave, rifles for people that hunt. I'm not like you, a hunter. And as you pointed out, handguns are made for killing people. They
you're
know
a
they're.
hunter? Is that what
Yeah.
you said?
I
You,
said
you
I'm not a
no, I'm
hunter.
not either. I'm
Oh,
anti-blood.
yeah, yeah, I am. Um, but I recognize some people want to hunt. So I think you have much more saner laws, in Ireland and many parts of the world.
That's not to say, Azim, that we don't have guns and that we don't have, shooting crimes, if you like. But I couldn't go in and just buy a gun in anywhere. Not that I didn't want one. And I just don't understand a normal person walking in and ordering a Kalashnikov rifle or a gun that fires 30 rounds in a second. The light bulb should be flashing in the shopkeeper's head, telling him that what is she looking for a gun that fires 30 rounds of bullets? There's
Right.
something going on here. Do you know? I don't understand that. And I just don't understand how a society, if there's no guns, no one can shoot each other.
Right. No, it's become an epidemic. In the first 130 days of 2021, we had 147 mass shootings. And a mass shooting as defined by an FBI is where more than 4 people are killed. Well, there's a lot of people that are killed that are under 4. It's reached epidemic source. I mean, every day, almost every day we hear, people that are taken or killed because of easy access to guns. And the lobby for people that want guns is so strong and it's all about money. When you come to, down to it, they want to sell that gun to anybody because it's about money. So the shopkeepers are not have a conscience. They are in the business to make money. As there is a huge lobby by the NRA, although the NRA is having some issues now, which I'm happy to see, but the lobby for people to own guns in America is very difficult to unravel. And although I think with Biden administration, we're starting to make slow progress, but absolutely, we definitely need to ban these automatic weapons and get rid of the midnight special, at least as a start, and then work on the rest of the areas. But very easy access. And there's so much anger. I mean, you just drive the freeways. I mean, we just had a situation here in Orange County, which is like an hour away from where I live, where a mother with a young baby in the back seat was cut off by another couple, and she flipped her finger, and the person in the other car shot and killed the baby.
Jesus.
I mean, just because of a silly traffic issue. I'm thinking, how much anger is in these people?
But you see, if they didn't have a gun, they would probably they'd probably use their fists, but at least you'll survive a fist. You have a better chance of surviving a fist if somebody hits you with it. But you have no chance of surviving. I mean, Tariq, am I correct in saying that when Tariq was shot, he was shot in the shoulder?
No, he was actually in the car. What they did is they ordered the pizza, but
That's
they
right.
gave the right apartment building address, but the wrong apartment number. So he knocked on many doors thinking that the person that took the order for the pizza wrote down a
The wrong number.
apartment number, but obviously nobody had. He came back to the car, put the pizzas in the trunk of his car, and got into the driver's side seat. And as he was about to leave the scene of the crime, the 18-year-old handed a 9mm handgun to Tony and gave him the order, bust him bones. He fired one round, came through the driver's side window.
Bones was his nickname.
Bones
Tony.
was his nickname, right. And it entered my son's body under the left shoulder blade and traveled across the upper part of his chest. And actually, the bullet exited from his right armpit. But as the coroner explained to me afterwards, he said the bullet followed a perfect path. And a perfect path, I thought that was an interesting choice of words. But he was very quick to tell me that he says, I'm not trying to be insensitive, Mr. Khamisa. We don't see a path like this very often. And what it means in my lingo is it destroyed all the vital organs in your son's body. And Tariq died a couple of minutes later, over a lousy pizza at the age of 20. I mean, the sudden, senseless death of an innocent, unarmed human being. I mean, the overwhelming grief of a family.
So much to give, but it took your daughter a lot longer to forgive or to meet Tony than it did you.
Yes.
When you told your daughter that you were going to visit Tony, that you had that obviously she knew that you and Ples were friends.
Yes.
That you were involved and she's involved in the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. But what did she feel like? What were her reactions to your forgiveness of Tony, and what was his mother's reaction?
Well,
They must,
I mean, yeah, they all, we all grieve differently,
yeah,
but the one thing that was very was a common thread in my family and Tariq's mother's family is we were all able to forgive. Um, I remember starting the foundation 9 months after Tariq died. And after starting the foundation, in the second meeting of the foundation, I invited the grandfather, and all my family was there. My father, my mother, Tariq's mother, my daughter, my sister, and they all welcomed Ples as much as I had. And my father shook his hand, and that night we were the lead story on the CBS channel, two grandfathers shaking hands on the opposite side of a murder. And uh, it was a very emotional moment. I spoke and talked about the foundation. Ples also spoke. We had the district attorney also spoke, uh, and our sentiments were that we were coming together to avoid, people losing children like I did and losing them to the criminal justice system. So Ples and I, pretty much have been there from day one, and then I started the foundation in '95 October. Tariq died in January, and then my daughter joined me in '98. I needed some help, and I said, "We can't pay you a lot, but you can live with me, and I'll feed you." And then she got really hooked, and then she ran the foundation for 6 years, and then in 2004 started her own family. So she left the foundation and then came back 6 years ago because my youngest grandchild, Mia, is now 10. So she was about 4 or 5 years old and starting preschool. And my oldest is 16. So, and I'm really blessed to have her. She's an amazing woman and has done an amazing job. And then, as you pointed out, she got to know Ples, all my family did. She eventually decided to go visit Tony. And I think that was 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And they have an amazing relationship. They talk on the phone pretty much every day. And they're very much like siblings. And Tony, as you know, is out. He's 40.
he's
Uh,
he's
and
out. He didn't
and
have
he's
it.
vol-
He
he's
didn't have.
volunteering for.
He
Pardon?
didn't have it easy, Tariq, in prison. He
Second,
uh, he didn't have it easy in prison.
no.
So
I mean, our prisons are human zoos, and uh, he had a very difficult time in prison. He spent several years in what they call the SHU, Special Housing Unit, by himself. It's when he actually aced his GED, which is our high school certification, where he spent 22 or 23 hours out of a day in a cell 8 by 8 by 8, and self-taught himself. There's a lot of segregation in prison. The white people, the Hispanic people, and the black people don't talk to each other. Uh, there's a
how
lot
do
of
they?
violence in prison.
But how
So
do they expect people to rehabilitate if you cannot? If you're in prison with black people and Hispanics and whites are in prison for crimes against people of the opposite, or say white attacks on black people or black attacks on white people, wouldn't you imagine when people are all under the one roof that that would be the perfect opportunity to get people together, to talk,
uh,
to discuss, to get to know each other, to see the other, to see to see that the other isn't an enemy,
right.
instead of separating them again inside in prison. So they spend 25 years basically of their lives in prison, separated from the people that they should have been helped to get to know.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I agree, especially when you come to the juvenile system, and probably true with the adult system, that our prisons should be oases of healing. I mean, um, the truth is, when juveniles are going to go to prison, the recidivism rate in the juvenile system is 84%.
Mm.
So they come out better criminals than they went in.
This is
There
it.
is no real opportunity for them to heal. Now Tony made it because the love of his grandfather and the support that I gave him and my family did, that we made sure that he always had that umbilical cord, making sure that we were there for him. Very difficult, but he's one of the 16% that actually did make it. It's not typical in America that
No.
happens. Now,
Well,
in the adult system, the recidivism rate is 66%. But there is a program in there's 3 federal prisons I speak at called LCP, called Life Connection Program. It's a spiritual program, so every inmate has a spiritual mentor. So if you are a Christian, you have a minister. If you're Jewish, you have a rabbi. If you're a Muslim, you have an imam.
um,
If you are Buddhist, you have a monk. And if you're none of that, you still have a spiritual advisor. And it is offered to inmates that are going to be paroled in the next 3 years. And I normally speak at the front end of it and talk about 3 things: about the the impact of crime on victims, because it didn't end with Tariq. Jennifer, which was Tariq's fiance, committed suicide 7 years later.
oh, I didn't know that. Oh my God, I didn't know that.
And
As
then, and then her parents divorced. And I worked with her, but she was one person that couldn't forgive Tony. In fact, was very angry with me. Um, how
but
can you how can you forgive Tony killed Tariq? And I told him I'm going to leave Tony to the higher power. I didn't want to go through life in anger and resentment, or I didn't want to go through life as a victim. There's no quality there. Unless you forgive, you remain a victim.
but Azim, I can understand people who have seen their loved ones murdered, wanting retribution and wanting the death penalty. I'm absolutely anti the death penalty for any circumstances, because I'm one of these people who believes that, if, which it is a crime to take another person's life, who gives the legal system the right to say, but legally we can take your life, but it's illegal for you to take somebody else's life. Life is very precious, and only one. If you believe in God, of any, we all believe in the one God, but if you believe in God, you believe that He is the only person who can give life and take life. And if the justice system says that Tony is guilty of killing Tariq, then how can the legal system say that it's right to kill Tony? That's my way of looking at it. However, I do understand people feeling so aggrieved that they want the death penalty, or that they want 25 years to life for a victim. How did you feel? Do you feel that Tony should have been paroled long ago, or do you think that it was right to give him the 25 years and he's out now, and
Right.
see him? He works with the Tariq Khamisa Foundation.
Right.
All right?
No, I was never in favor of Tony being charged as an adult. At 14, you're not an adult. It takes 16 to drive a car, 18 to vote, and 21 to buy an alcoholic drink in California. And science has now told us that it probably takes 25 years for the brain to have fully developed. So, I wanted Tony to go to juvenile court and have the most lenient possible sentence. It's not in my hand, because once there's a crime, it's the criminal justice system, is the state of California against Tony Hicks. The victims are not part of that process. I speak a lot on restorative justice, which is a whole new conversation. Um, so it was not in my hands, but I was asked by the district attorney, and I told him I want Tony to get the most lenient. He's not the enemy here. And I'd already started the foundation, and hoped, had voiced that I hope that someday Tony will join us, which he has. And he's now volunteering for a foundation. He's got a full-time job being a plumber. And at 39, he got his driver's license. I'm very proud of him. He passed his GED in prison, and he's now helping kids, not following his former footsteps. And it's very powerful for him to be on stage with me or my daughter, talking to kids, telling them, I wish I can turn the clock back. I know we've saved him in my hearts of hearts, but think about how many he will save. And that, I think, is the power of the journey of forgiveness, because I just had lunch with Tony. I see him. And, we used to write a lot when he was in prison, and we've done 2 or 3 interviews together, and we've spoken at conferences together, and it's powerful. His voice reaches, and the foundation reaches tens of thousands of kids every year. And it's amazing.
I interviewed a lady there recently. She's English born, but she lives here in Limerick. And she became a pen friend and subsequently married Matthew Shifford. She's Heike Phelan is her name, and she married Matthew Shifford, who's serving 25 years for murder in Texas, in a maximum security prison in Texas. And having interviewed Heike, I actually came to the conclusion that it's having people like Heike Phelan and the Tariq Khamisa or the Azim Khamisas of the world that, are there, if you like, and can see the good, can see the victim, can see the human being behind what other people see as the criminal. Their actions. Now, they were different. Heike's husband, Matthew, was an adult when he committed the crime, but he had a traumatic and bad childhood, whereas Tony was a 14-year-old. Now, again, I will say that I'm not making any judgment about whether he should or shouldn't have got 25 years. It depends. I don't think I would be as forgiving as you, I have to say, Azim. Having said that, I think you have to be in somebody's shoes. You have to live in somebody's shoes to understand why a person makes the decision. And I'm glad you did make that decision, because it has helped Tony and will help generations of children because of Tony. The children he will help and the children who they'll go on to help.
Right. Yeah, it was the right choice. I am blessed that I had that download that there are victims at both ends of the gun. This has become an important part of my life now. I didn't do this when Tariq was alive, traveled the world and had a good life, worked in financial services, often flew in from London, changed suitcases and went to Tokyo.
Great life.
But then I understood that, we all have a spiritual purpose, and somehow in this tragedy, I was able to find it. And, financial service was about money. This is about saving lives of kids, far more meaningful, far more fulfilling. I've talked to now over 1 million kids, over 1,000 presentations, and another 600 talks I've given to adults. I've written 5 books and spreading forgiveness so that we can have more peace in the world. And it all came from that decision to forgive. And I think that forgiveness is not very well understood especially in the Western culture. But I think it's important to separate yourself from the offender, because one of the biggest impediments to forgiveness is judgment. And I always told Jennifer that took her own life that I'm going to leave Tony to the higher power. He has his journey. I have my journey. If I stay in anger, resentment, or hatred, who am I hurting? Mandela made a very good comment about this, that resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. Eventually, that anger and resentment and hatred becomes cancer. And the other part I think is important to get is that if you don't forgive, I didn't want to go through life on crutches. I had a very full life when Tariq was alive. I wanted that life back. We all do. And if you don't forgive, you remain a victim. And I have a full life today. In fact, I like this life better because it's more fulfilling and more meaningful. Not that I don't want Tariq back. Of course, I want him back in a New York second, but that's not possible. But having made that decision, you are creating a better society by example and by teaching that forgiveness is, in a way, a gift you give to yourselves. I mean, there wasn't much when I wrote my first book, From Murder to Forgiveness. You almost had to go back to the scriptures. That was 98, 3 years after Tariq died. But today, there are over 800 clinical studies that promote forgiveness as a healthy thing to do. And in Stanford, there's a forgiveness project. There's another one in London run by Marina Cantacuzino. I don't know if you know her. She's a good friend of mine.
No.
She would be a good person for you to interview. Be happy to introduce you.
I'd be delighted if you can put me in contact with her.
And she has a amazing nonprofit and many, many stories. Of course, mine is one of them about forgiveness, and she promotes that. She was a journalist and saw some examples of forgiveness in horrific circumstances, in wars and stuff, and started the Forgiveness Project in the UK. And so, I wish there were more forgiving people, and hopefully this interview will inspire more people to understand that that there is a spirit, and we need to give our people that offend a second chance. We need to have the humanity to understand that we all make mistakes, and sometimes we make a big mistake, like Tony did. But there is still buried within them something of value, as Tony is proving, that we need to give them the opportunity to come back and become a resource and help create a better community, than to lock them away and throw the key away. I mean, how does that make a better society?
No, I understand that people have to be punished for their crimes. I absolutely understand that people have to experience some punishment, but within that justice system, there has to be some form of education. It just beggars belief that a system of education where you have blacks killing, whites killing, Hispanics killing, that they're all together in the perfect maybe situation to work with people and see, oh, I never lived with, or I never knew, say, for instance, a white person before, or I never knew a Hispanic person before, or a Muslim or a Jew before. But we're all living together now, and I never realized that we all had so much in common. We tend, and I've said it in my own book, we tend to other everybody. We tend to look at people and say, he's another, he's a foreigner, when in actual fact, we're all foreign. I'm foreign to you, you're foreign to me. And it's that sense of difference that makes us the same. We're all connected by the same. We're even different to ourselves, because the person I project to you might be a completely different person to somebody else, or everyone might view me completely different than you might. Jacques Derrida, the French Albanian Jewish philosopher, once said, to understand the other, you must first understand the other within yourself.
That's well said. It's a good line. And that's what happened when I met Tony. We were together for an hour and a half. Of course, I had some difficult questions for him.
Of course.
But in that hour and a half, there was a time when we locked eyeballs. And he held that glance looking into my eyes for a long time. And I was looking to meet a murderer, and I didn't. I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity. That I got the spark in him was no different than the spark in me or you or anybody else who is watching this interview, because we all come from the same source, and you talked about that. And I wasn't expecting that. And at that point, I told Tony, I've forgiven you because I've been working with your grandfather for a good 4 years. And I want you to know when you come out, you have a job at the foundation. And as I left the prison, I still remember that I had completed my journey of forgiveness, that there was a big albatross that was lifted off my shoulders. And as I walked out of the prison, I noticed that my stride walking out was a lot more bouncier than the one I walked in with. And the next day, the grandfather called me and says, Azim, that meeting you had with Tony totally transformed him. And I said, it was the same for me. My preeminent thought was, why did I wait 5 years? And he says, as you were leaving, Tony looked at me and said, Daddy, there's a special person. I killed his one and only son. Not only has he forgiven me, he's offered me a job. I'm not worthy of it, but I'm going to try. He was 19 years old. He's now 40, and a big resource. And the grandfather told me, after you met him, he totally shifted. He never said that to me before. He always used to tell me, I'm not going to make it in prison. I'm going to die. A good-looking young person in an adult prison. So he changed. He started to study. He's very well read. He's read the Bible, the Quran, the Torah. He's very interested in Sufism, which is my faith. And he's a likable, smart, intelligent young person. And I know that he's going to do some wonderful things working with the foundation and in his life. So you're right. It's not the other. We all come from the same spark. And to understand that, I like this quote that you just shared. I did not know this quote, that there is no such thing as another.
Understand the other. You've got to understand the other within yourself.
Within yourself, and that's empathy.
Because if I feel comfortable with you, I'm going to project I'm going to project myself in a way to you that right. I mightn't be seen as by somebody else. And so everyone has so many different personalities within themselves, different personalities that project themselves outwards. So, we're all very different people, but at the very core, we all want the same things in life, which is family and love and acceptance and financial security, I suppose, in a sense that we can actually survive. But it's interesting that since Tony's case, since Tariq's death, the law has changed, and no longer can a 14-year-old be charged as an adult. However, I guess they couldn't retrospectively forgive him the crime or charge him as a juvenile, because he had been charged as an adult prior to the change in status. So he was charged as an adult, but now if a 14-year-old does a similar act in California, they can no longer be charged as an adult. Do you think that it weakens the legal system in a sense that there doesn't seem to be any it's a kind of a double-edged sword. If youngsters don't believe that there is an impact, or that they won't be punished for their crime sufficiently, do you think that it'll prevent crime, or do you think it'll add to youngsters committing crimes because they know they're not going to be charged as adults?
No, there is no evidence of that. In fact, the death penalty creates its public display of vengeance, is what I say. I'm against the death penalty, like you are.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
if anything, uh, it encourages more crime. And I'm glad the age has gone back to 16. But even when you look at that, the whole criminal justice system is broke. It rarely produces justice. I think that a better solution is restorative justice, which I've written a lot about. It comes from the Aboriginal cultures of New Zealand and Australia. And the goal there is to heal the victim, bring the offender back as a contributing member of society and a functioning member, and to heal the community, much like we're doing in the foundation. I mean, you can't bring Tariq back, but working with Tony and the grandfather, less people are ending up dead, which is meaningful to me and my family. We brought Tony back as a functioning, contributing member to society. And by doing the programs we're doing in schools, saving lives of kids, we're healing the community. That is a lot better way to have a more humane and a compassionate way to deal with crime. I always have said that in every crime, there's an opportunity to do better society based on these principles, and not in the way we run the criminal justice system, because all it does, it creates more criminal, promotes more violence, and creates more division, within ourselves, which we talked about.
I interviewed a couple of weeks ago a woman, and she forgave her father's killer. Her father's killer was de Kock. He was the South African police officer, and
Right.
he killed her father in a well. They set the father up in a barricade, and he went over to the window. Her father was a member of the ANC, and they were fighting for the rights for Black people in South Africa during apartheid. And she forgave her father's killer as well. And she went to the prison, and she said when all of her mother and they all spoke about the effect his murder, him murdering their husbands, and that, she said she just looked him in the face. I think she was 15 at the time, and she said, "I forgive you." And she said he burst out crying, because she said up to then she had been eaten alive. She said in her stomach, the doctors had told her they'd never seen a child with worse ulcers in her stomach than she had. And she knew, like you, she said she knew that if she didn't forgive this man, she would have died physically herself, because it would have eaten away at her. And forgiving him was actually healing her. And
Absolutely.
she was an extraordinary interview. Azim, it was just an absolute pleasure. I don't know. It's an understatement to say it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and I wish you every luck in the future and a huge success with the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, and give my regards to Ples. He seems a lovely man as well. I love his caps.
Right.
Tell him I love his caps. And to Tony. And I wish Tony continued success in life. And finally, to the memory of Tariq, I hope this interview was in some way a tribute to his life. And
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for having me, and appreciate you promoting forgiveness and nonviolence and all the work you're doing to make a better world. So thanks for doing that.
And if you could maybe put me in contact with that lady you were telling me about.
Yeah, I will send an email introducing you to Marina Cantacuzino. I think you should have her on your show. She's an expert on forgiveness. So you'll find her amazing to interview. Yeah.
Thank you, Tariq. Salam alaikum.
Malaikum salam. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.